Chapter 1: The First Spark of Fire. The morning mist clung to the forest like a soft blanket, the sun barely piercing through the dense canopy above. In the small village of Windstone, nestled in the farthest corner of the kingdom, a young boy named Kael had just turned 16. He was tall for his age, with dark hair that fell messily around his face and eyes that shimmered like storm clouds. Today, however, something felt different, like a storm was brewing on the horizon. Kael had spent his entire life in Windstone, a village that had long ago been forgotten by the rest of the kingdom. The world had moved on, empires rose and fell, wars waged and ceased, but Windstone had remained unchanged. Its cobblestone streets, the crumbling stone walls of its houses, and the ever-present shadow of the great forest surrounding it all seemed to exist outside of time itself. For years, Kael had wandered those streets, hearing the stories of distant lands, of powerful kings and legendary creatures. Yet, he had never believed in the tales. His father, a blacksmith, always told him that the world had no place for myth. The only thing that mattered was hard work and perseverance. But deep down, Kael longed for something more. The call of adventure, the promise of something extraordinary waiting just beyond the horizon, tugged at his heart. He wanted to know if the stories were true. He wanted to see dragons. But dragons were only stories, weren't they? Kael had spent countless nights lying awake, staring at the stars, imagining what it would be like to see a dragon with his own eyes. He had heard the elders whisper about them, creatures of fire and scale that had once ruled the skies. They had been hunted to extinction centuries ago, or so the stories said. But Kael couldn't shake the feeling that they were still out there, somewhere in the vast wilderness, waiting to be discovered. On this particular morning, Kael's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of his father's hammer striking the anvil. The rhythmic clangs echoed through their small cottage, a constant reminder of the life Kael had always known. "Kael," his father's voice called, rough and commanding. "Get out here and help me with this." Kael groaned but reluctantly pushed himself out of bed, pulling on his leather boots. He had never been one for the work in the forge, but it was the family business, and his father expected him to follow in his footsteps. The thought of continuing his father's legacy, making swords and shields for a village that would never need them, was not a future Kael had ever envisioned for himself. Stepping out into the cool morning air, Kael made his way to the forge, where his father stood hunched over the glowing metal. The fire's heat made the air shimmer, and the smell of burning coal filled the air. "You're late," his father said without looking up, his thick arms moving expertly as he shaped the metal. "Get the tongs. I need to shape this blade." Kael grabbed the tongs, his mind not on the task at hand but on the restless feeling in his chest. As he worked alongside his father, his thoughts wandered to the stories he had heard as a child. His mind replayed the tales of dragons, of knights, of distant lands filled with wonders beyond imagination. He dreamed of adventure, of discovering something that would make him more than just another blacksmith in a forgotten village. That's when it happened. The earth trembled beneath his feet, just slightly at first, like the faintest whisper of an approaching storm. Kael paused, glancing around in confusion. His father didn't seem to notice, continuing his work as if nothing had changed. But Kael knew something was wrong. The tremor came again, this time stronger, shaking the very walls of the forge. A crack appeared in the stone wall, sending a shower of dust to the floor. Kael's heart raced. Something was happening, something he couldn't explain. Suddenly, a loud roar echoed from deep within the forest, a sound that sent a chill down Kael's spine. It was unlike anything he had ever heard before, deep, guttural, and filled with a power that seemed to vibrate in the very air. His father froze, his eyes wide as he looked at Kael. "What was that?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. Before Kael could answer, the ground shook again, this time with such force that the forge trembled. The roar grew louder, and Kael could feel it deep in his bones. His heart pounded in his chest, the excitement and fear swirling within him. "Stay here," his father said sharply, his voice breaking the silence. "I'll go check the perimeter." But Kael wasn't listening. The stories, the whispers, everything he had ever heard, suddenly it all clicked into place. This wasn't some natural disaster or the usual tremor of the earth. This was something else. Kael ran toward the door, pushing past his father. "I'm going," he said, his voice firm despite the fear that gripped his chest. "I'm going to find out what that is." His father's hand shot out, grabbing his arm. "You're mad if you think I'll let you go out there alone. You don't know what's out there." But Kael couldn't stop himself. He yanked his arm free and ran toward the forest, his heart pounding in his chest. The world was calling to him, urging him to follow, to discover what lay beyond the boundaries of his small village. As he disappeared into the trees, the air grew thick with the smell of smoke, and the roar grew louder, closer. Kael didn't know what he was going to find, but he knew one thing for sure: the stories were real. And he was about to discover just how true they were. Chapter 2: Into the Heart of the Forest. The air in the forest was thick with the scent of charred wood and something far more ancient, a smell that Kael couldn't place but that seemed to cling to everything around him. The trees, towering and twisted, loomed like silent sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching out like claws, blocking the weak sunlight from above. It was as if the forest itself had been waiting for him. Kael moved swiftly, adrenaline pushing him forward despite the fear gnawing at his insides. His boots sank into the soft earth, leaves crunching underfoot as the ground trembled again, more violently this time. He could feel the vibrations beneath him, almost as if the very heartbeat of the earth had quickened. The roar, deep and powerful, seemed to shake the trees themselves, and Kael's heart pounded in time with the noise. What could it be? He had no idea, but there was no turning back now. Every instinct told him to run, to return to the safety of the village and to ignore the sound that seemed to call out to him from the heart of the forest. But another part of him, something deep inside, urged him to push forward, to discover what lay ahead. It was as if the roar, the tremors, were meant for him, beckoning him towards something that only he could find. As Kael pushed deeper into the forest, the roar grew louder, more distinct. It was unmistakably a creature, massive, powerful, and filled with a primal force that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. He had heard stories, of course, legends of beasts that once ruled the skies, of dragons and creatures of myth. But those were just stories, weren't they? The villagers had long stopped believing in them. The world had moved on. But Kael wasn't so sure anymore. The stories, the whispers, everything he had once dismissed now felt all too real. The ground quaked again, and Kael stumbled, catching himself on a nearby tree. His breath came in ragged gasps as he struggled to keep his bearings. The sound of the roar had now shifted, closer, sharper, as if whatever was making it was near. His heart raced as he stumbled forward, determined to reach the source. After what felt like hours of running, Kael found himself in a clearing. The trees around him had thinned, and ahead, in the distance, a dark shape loomed against the smoke-filled sky. It was enormous, impossibly large, and covered in scales that shimmered in the dim light. The creature was pacing, its massive wings unfurled, casting a shadow that stretched for miles. For a moment, Kael froze, his breath caught in his throat. This was no myth. This was no dream. Before him stood a dragon. It was everything the stories had promised and more, a magnificent, terrifying creature that dwarfed anything Kael had ever seen. Its scales were dark as night, each one reflecting the faint light that filtered through the smoke. Its wings stretched wide, like the canopy of a great tree, and Kael could feel the heat radiating from its body even from this distance. The dragon's eyes, gleaming like molten gold, locked onto Kael. For a moment, neither of them moved, the forest around them completely still, as if holding its breath. Kael's heart raced in his chest, and he could feel the blood pounding in his ears. He should have run. He should have turned back. But he couldn't. The creature's gaze held him in place, a strange connection forming between them. The dragon let out a low growl, the sound vibrating through Kael's bones. It took a step forward, its claws scraping the earth with an almost predatory grace. Kael instinctively stepped back, his hand reaching for the dagger at his side, though he knew it would be useless against such a creature. But then, something surprising happened. The dragon stopped, its gaze softening, as if studying Kael with a quiet curiosity. The air between them seemed to crackle with energy, the space charged with a tension that Kael couldn't explain. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, though his voice shook with the weight of his own fear. He wasn't sure if the dragon could understand him, but it was the only thing he could think to say. The dragon tilted its head slightly, its golden eyes narrowing, then stepped closer. The ground trembled beneath Kael's feet, but he stood his ground, his legs stiff with fear. As the dragon approached, Kael saw a strange symbol etched into its scales, glowing faintly, like some ancient rune. It was almost as if the dragon had been marked by something greater, something beyond his understanding. Without warning, the dragon let out another roar, but this time, it wasn't one of aggression. It was a call loud, powerful, and filled with an urgency that Kael couldn't ignore. Suddenly, Kael felt a tug in his chest, as if something deep within him was being drawn to the dragon. It was as though the creature was beckoning him, urging him to follow, to discover what lay beyond the forest and into the unknown. The roar had awakened something in Kael, a part of him he hadn't known existed. It was as if his destiny was bound to the dragon's fate. With his heart pounding in his chest, Kael took a step forward. The dragon's eyes glimmered with an unreadable expression, but it didn't move. It simply watched him, waiting. Kael's hand hesitated at his side, then slowly reached out. The air around him seemed to crackle as he approached the creature, his mind spinning with questions and fears. Was he mad to do this? Was he walking straight into danger? But the pull, the connection, was undeniable. Kael took another step, and then another, until he stood before the dragon, close enough to feel the heat radiating from its body. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, in a voice that seemed to echo inside his mind, the dragon spoke. "You are the one," it said, its voice deep and ancient. "You are the one who will awaken the fire." Chapter 3: The Awakening of Fire. Kael stood frozen, his hand still outstretched toward the dragon, unable to comprehend what had just happened. The words echoed in his mind, a voice that had not come from the dragon's mouth but from deep within, as though the creature's soul had communicated directly with his own. The world around him seemed to blur, the forest fading into the background, leaving only the dragon and Kael in the center of it all. "You are the one who will awaken the fire," the dragon repeated, its voice now more insistent, as if it were trying to pierce through the veil of confusion that had settled over Kael. Kael's heart was racing. The heat from the dragon's body was almost unbearable now, its molten eyes still fixed on him. The air between them felt electric, charged with an energy that Kael couldn't explain, yet felt down to the core of his being. "I don't understand," Kael managed to whisper, his voice barely audible over the rising hum of power in the air. "What do you mean? What fire?" The dragon's golden eyes glimmered with a strange sadness, and for a brief moment, it looked almost weary. It was as if centuries of history were hidden within those eyes, centuries of pain and longing that Kael could barely begin to fathom. "The fire is a force older than time," the dragon's voice rumbled, resonating deep within Kael's chest. "It is the power that lies dormant within the heart of the world. But it has been lost, hidden away for generations. Now, the time has come for it to be reborn. And you are the key." Kael's mind was racing, the weight of the words pressing down on him like a heavy cloak. He had always believed that the world worked in simple terms: hard work, discipline, dedication. But now, standing before this ancient creature, none of that seemed to matter. Nothing made sense anymore. "But I'm just a blacksmith's son," Kael protested, his voice shaking. "I don't even know what you're talking about. Why me?" The dragon lowered its massive head, its eyes level with Kael's. Because you are the descendant of the ancient bloodline, the one who is destined to awaken the fire. Your blood carries the spark, the connection to the old power. You may not know it yet, but you were born for this purpose. Kael's breath caught in his throat. He had always felt out of place in Windstone, like he didn't quite belong. But this? This was something beyond anything he could have ever imagined. He was no hero, no chosen one. He was just Kael, the boy who spent his days working in his father's forge, dreaming of a world he would never touch. You're wrong, Kael said, shaking his head, trying to fight off the overwhelming sense of destiny that seemed to be pulling him in. I don't even know where to begin. I'm not ready for this. I'm not who you think I am. The dragon's gaze softened, and for the first time, Kael saw a flicker of understanding in its eyes. None of us are ready, it said gently. But the fire does not wait for readiness. It is a force of nature, and it will not be denied. The world is changing, Kael. There is darkness stirring, and the fire is the only thing that can push it back. Kael's mind spun with the weight of the words, but something deep inside him, a flicker of hope, or perhaps fear, made him take another step forward. He could feel the pull of the dragon's presence, a connection that was almost magnetic, as if he were drawn to the creature and to whatever ancient power it carried. Show me, Kael whispered, his voice barely audible but filled with a quiet determination. Show me what I have to do. The dragon's eyes glimmered in approval, and the very air seemed to shift around them. Without another word, the dragon stepped back, unfurling its massive wings. The movement was graceful, almost fluid, despite the creature's size. The earth beneath Kael's feet shook again, but this time, the tremor was different. It was as though the ground itself was responding to the dragon's call, the world shifting in response to the ancient force that had just awakened. The dragon spread its wings wide, and the flames that licked at the edges of its scales flared up, casting a warm, golden light across the clearing. Kael could feel the heat on his skin, the fire's power radiating from the creature like a living, breathing thing. This is only the beginning, the dragon said, its voice now resonating in Kael's mind. You must follow me. The journey will not be easy. There are dangers ahead, forces that will try to stop you, to stop us. But you are not alone. You never have been. Kael stood still, the weight of the moment crashing down on him. The dragon's words felt like a promise and a warning, both at once. The world was changing, and Kael's place in it had just been revealed. Without another word, the dragon turned and began to move, its massive form gliding silently through the clearing. Kael hesitated for a moment, but then, with a deep breath, he followed. The forest seemed to part before them, the trees bending away as if the very earth itself was clearing the path for the dragon and its new companion. Kael's heart pounded in his chest, and his mind raced with 1,000 questions, but one thing was clear, his life was no longer his own. It had been swept away in the wake of the dragon's presence, and there was no turning back. As they moved deeper into the forest, the world seemed to shift around them. The trees grew taller, the air thick with the promise of something ancient and powerful. Kael could feel the fire stirring within him, a flicker of heat that matched the warmth of the dragon's presence. It was both exhilarating and terrifying, but Kael couldn't help but feel that this was where he was meant to be. The fire had awoken. And so had Kael. Chapter 4: The Path of Fire. The forest grew denser, the trees so tall that they seemed to touch the sky. Kael had been following the dragon for hours, his legs aching from the long trek, but he could not stop. There was an urgency to everything now, as if time itself had begun to slip away. The air was thick with the scent of smoke and ancient earth, and the ground beneath his boots seemed to pulse with every step. The dragon moved ahead with an almost effortless grace, its wings tucked close to its body, its scales gleaming in the pale light that filtered through the trees. Kael couldn't help but watch in awe, his mind still reeling from the events that had unfolded. The creature beside him, the one who had once been nothing more than a legend, was now real. And it had chosen him. The weight of the responsibility, the weight of the fire that lay within him, was almost too much to bear. But Kael had come this far, and there was no turning back. He had felt the pull, the connection, and now he was committed to this path. Whatever lay ahead, he would face it. No matter the cost. The dragon stopped suddenly, its massive head turning to face Kael. Its golden eyes flickered with an unreadable expression, but there was something softer there now, a hint of warmth. "We are close," the dragon said, its voice deep and resonant, echoing in Kael's mind. "The fire lies ahead, but the trials will be great. Only those who are truly worthy can reach it." Kael swallowed hard. He had no idea what those trials would be, but something in the dragon's tone made him understand that this was not going to be easy. He wasn't sure if he was worthy, but he would find out soon enough. The dragon's wings unfurled slightly, and it turned back toward the path ahead. Without another word, it began to move forward again, its powerful limbs pushing through the thick underbrush with ease. Kael followed closely, his thoughts swirling. The deeper they went into the forest, the more the air seemed to change. The temperature dropped, and a strange stillness filled the space around them. It was as if they were entering another world, one that was hidden from the eyes of men. The trees were older here, their bark cracked and weathered, their branches twisted into unnatural shapes. The silence was deafening, the only sound being the crunch of leaves beneath Kael's feet. Eventually, they came to a clearing, the trees parting to reveal a wide, open space. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient stone structure, half crumbled and covered. Would not rest until the world was saved. The dragon's voice echoed in his mind once more, "The fire will guide you, Kael. But you must remember, power is not the answer. The heart is what will see you through." With the fire in his veins and the dragon at his side, Kael took the first step into a new world, a world that would soon feel the heat of his resolve. And with that, his journey had truly begun.